Hello, everyone. Garrett Jackson with the Lawton Town Crier, an independent local news organization. Welcome back to the Sunday Evening Crier. Before we get into the documents, I want to acknowledge something. A lot of things are being said online right now about the December 18th, 2025 Lawton Economic Development Authority meeting and the Westwin Development Project. Opinions, speculation, frustrations, and assumptions about what happened and why. That is completely understandable. This is a major issue for Lawton. But tonight, instead of reacting to the post or rumors, we're going to slow this down and put it in context, because this is one of those stories where the process matters just as much as the documents. We're going to look at what was requested through open records, what was provided, what Westwin has said publicly, and where things stand as we wait for additional comment from the City and LEDA. We're not here to relitigate social media debates. We're here to look at the records, timelines, and statements, and let people draw their own conclusions. After the December 18th, 2025 LEDA meeting, I submitted a formal open records request to the City of Lawton under the Oklahoma Open Records Act. The request was straightforward. I asked for public records related to Westwin elements and communications received by the City of Lawton and or the Lawton Economic Development Authority covering July 1, 2025 to present. That included letters from Westwin to the City and LEDA, correspondence and attachments involving City leadership, LEDA staff, and relevant departments, and internal communications referencing the receipt, review, and response to Westwin communications. Things like summaries, memos, talking points, forwarded emails, or draft responses. I asked for the records electronically, and I also stated clearly that if the request was too broad, I was willing to narrow it. That's important, because that's how the law is designed to work. I want to pause for a moment, because this part really matters. The Open Records Act isn't a weapon. It is not a trolling net for fishing through government files, and while people sometimes describe it as a hammer, that's not really the best way to think about it. The Open Records Act is a tool for the public and for government. For the public, it is a way to ensure transparency when decisions affect taxpayers and the community. It allows people to see the records that already exist and understand how decisions were made. But it also helps cities and departments with accountability. It creates a clear, documented process of what was requested, when it was received, how it was interpreted, and what was ultimately released. The structure protects everyone involved because it replaces assumption and accusations with records and timelines. In many cases, informal requests work just fine, but when issues span multiple departments involving legal review, relate to major public decisions, the formal open records process provides clarity and consistency. As part of my original request, I explicitly stated that I was willing to narrow the scope and request was considered too broad. That's not unusual, and in fact, that's exactly how the process is supposed to work. On the City of Lawton's own open record website, they explain that while requesters doesn't need to identify the document with exact precision, staff may assist in clarifying the request. That's what happened here. I worked with the City Attorney's Office to narrow the scope of the request, not to change it, but to focus it more precisely on documents related to the cancellation of the Westwin contract. And that distinction is important. With that context, let's talk about how it worked in this case. The city processed the request through a public records center and initially issued a cost estimate based on the volume of potential responsive materials. After clarification and narrowing, the city ultimately released responsive records electronically. And I want to say clearly and on the record, the city worked professionally with me on this request. The clarification process worked the way it's supposed to, and the records were produced. That matters because open records is not about confrontation. It's about creating a documented trail that everyone can see. And when it is used correctly, it helps cities demonstrate that decisions were handled through a documented, lawful process and not behind closed doors. One of the most important documents released is a letter dated early September 2025 titled Election Not to Proceed and Proposed Resolution of Outstanding Matters. This letter, but it documents Westwin's decision. And I want to be precise about the timeline. Although the letter itself is dated in September, it explicitly states that it is memorializing discussions that took place on August 26, 2025, involving Westwin, the City of Lawton, CCIDA, LEDA, and LEDC. So the substantive discussion happened in late August. The September letter did not initiate the decision track, it formalized and documented it. The letter records that Westwin confirmed it would not proceed with development of a large-scale commercial refinery in Lawton, and it characterizes the election as final. The record also includes formal written acknowledgement by Westwin CEO dated September 11, 2025, with a certified digital signature. That matters because this is not a draft or an internal memo. It is a memorialized record that was received, acknowledged, and signed. There's one more document that explains what happened next. The records include a draft letter notice of termination of Part 2 large-scale commercial refinery dated January 2026 with the date left blank. In plain terms, this letter states that the City, LEDA, and CCIDA acknowledge that Westwin's September letter prepared to memorialize the August 26 discussion and executed by Westwin on September 11th served as written notice that the Westwin elected not to proceed with the large-scale commercial refinery in Lawton. This letter then confirms that obligations related to Part 2 are terminated, including any obligations for additional financial assistance or property conveyance for the commercial refinery. It also makes clear that Part 1 obligations related to the pilot facility remain in effect, and it references ongoing requirements like continuous operation and employment-related certifications. Finally, it lays out a set of conditions tied to a May 31, 2026 closing date, including repayment amounts and a site purchase price, along with what happens if those conditions aren't met. I'm not adding interpretation here. I'm pointing to viewers to what the document says, and it is posted with the full record. One more point of context from the public record. LEDA held regular meetings throughout the fall. The published minutes reflect meetings on September 18, 2025 and November 20, 2025. The regular scheduled October 16, 2025 meeting was canceled due to lack of a quorum. That matters because it shows that this wasn't a one-night conversation in December. The public bodies involved were meeting and conducting business throughout the period, and we'll be walking the timeline in more detail in future episodes as we continue to review the records. One important note about the December 18, 2025 meeting itself. As of now, the written minutes for the meeting have not yet been approved or published. However, the complete audio recording of the December 18th meeting is publicly available, and I have posted it in full with no commentary added, so people can listen and follow along for themselves. That recording includes formal action related to Westwin elements, including joint resolution acknowledging the election not to proceed and termination of redevelopment agreement obligations. It also added chapter markers tied to the agenda items so listeners can easily navigate directly to the Westwin discussion. Agenda materials referenced during the meeting are available through Lawton Economic Development Authority, and we will continue adding those records as they are published. With that timeline established, it is also important to look at what Westwin said publicly. On December 17, 2025, the day before the LEDA meeting, I sent Westwin a formal request for comment, offering multiple options to explain or clarify their position. For transparency, I'm posting my request for comment email and the Westwin response exactly as sent and received so the public can see the full exchange. To be precise about timing and awareness, Westwin received a formal request for comment the night before on December 17th, offering multiple options to respond, and the September letter we discussed earlier was acknowledged and digitally signed by Westwin's CEO. I'm not characterizing intent here. I'm laying out a sequence so viewers can review the records and draw their own conclusions. Westwin responded with a written statement issued as a for immediate release response. In that statement, Westwin said commercial site selection remains ongoing. Final site selection is anticipated in the first quarter of 2026. The demonstration facility in Lawton remains in operation. And if Lawton is not the final site, the company intends to responsibly address outstanding commitments. Those two things can be true at the same time. A final decision not to proceed with the commercial refinery in Lawton and an ongoing decision about where the commercial refinery will ultimately be built. That's why the documents matter, because they help clarify what decision was made, when, and how it was documented. And for transparency, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. All of the files released under this open records request are being posted to the Lawton Town Crier wiki exactly as they were received. That includes the original files, emails, invoices, and record request documentation. The link is in the video description. It was perfectly appropriate for the city to release records in the format that they are kept in during the normal course of business. For ease of review, we will be extracting and highlighting specific documents referenced in our reporting, but those extractions are in addition to and not a substitute for the full record. Anyone who wants to review everything in the original form can do so, and anyone who wants to follow along with the reporting can reference the extracted documents we point to. That way, the public has access to both the complete record and the context needed to understand it. Because this is a significant issue for Lawton, and because it's the holiday season, we reached out for on-the-record comments from Mayor Stan Booker, Richard Rogowski, and Brad Cooksey. By press time, only Richard Rogowski responded directly, and he indicated that he would reach out to Mr. Cooksey to seek comment. We are still waiting on a direct comment from LEDA and from Mayor Booker himself, and we will include their perspectives as soon as they are available. I want to be very clear about something important here so people understand the full context. The mayor's office did respond. Julie Mansky, the city council's relation liaison, replied on behalf of the mayor's office and explained that Mayor Booker is currently on holiday leave and is scheduled to return on Monday, January 5th, 2026. She also confirmed that the request was received and would be followed up after his return. That's an appropriate process. The request was acknowledged, routed, and will follow up accordingly. So here's where things stand tonight. We've established what was requested and why. We've shown the key documents and timeline it reflects. We've shared Westwin's public statement. We've requested comment from city leadership and LEDA, and we're making the documents public so anyone can review them for themselves. This is also just the first step. We are actively reviewing the full record now, and future episodes will walk through the timeline in more detail, what the documents say and don't say, and what questions remain unanswered. As always, when additional comment comes in, we'll include it. For ongoing coverage and updates, follow the Lawton Town Crier on social media and subscribe here on YouTube. I'm Garrett Jackson, and this is the Sunday Evening Crier. Thank you for watching, and we'll keep working on this, and I'll see you at City Hall.